What's your reason?
I don't know. I don't know, but I thought, oh, if I'm running down to my office, I will take my book from this morning's class that I still had with me. So I thought to myself, I'll take that down there. And I got down there, and for the life of me, I still don't know what I went down for. So I brought candy back, because, you know, it seems silly to come back empty-handed.
It was me. I confused you and caused you to lose what you were doing.
No, I don't know. Like, Jonathan left and said we still had time, and I was like, oh, I could run down to the office. I remember the train of thought. And I thought, oh, if I'm going, I should take this book back. And then I talked to you, and then I went downstairs, and I laid my thing down, and thought to myself, Shushan, how'd you get so old?
Maybe it'll come to you
It
later.
has nothing to do with being old. I think it has to do with having many things in your mind. It's almost like, you know, you draw out names out of a hat or a bowl, you know,
Yeah.
for some kind of prize or whatever. And sometimes that's just what my mind is. It's stirring, a constant stirring. You're like, here, this one, no, not that one, throw that one. And then you forget to throw it out and you put it back in, and so later you pick that one back out again. You're like,
Did we
wait,
do that one already?
yes, exactly.
Okay, so the moral of the story is, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
And it's not just because I'm old. Check.
I'm done. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It reminded me of Screaming American.
Yeah.
American. Yes. Our president would say, you're probably more akin to Pocahontas than Elizabeth Warren. But, you know.
Friends, neighbors, countrymen.
I just don't understand kids of this, like, they all want to communicate using electronic devices, but then when you need to communicate with them, they don't want to use electronic devices.
So what you're saying is they want to do what they want to do when they want to do it?
Seems that way.
Interesting. Why is this not coming up on the screen?
I don't know.
Do you remember that analogy of, you know, circling the hand in the bowl? That's probably what's going on right now.
Why? It's connected, right? Right, it's the same cord. Oh no, I just unplugged it. Ha, 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 ha.
Good job.
Victory in the name of Jesus. What happy day. So class has not started yet. I'm not wrong, right?
There's still another minute.
Okay.
Look at you, so prepared.
I do have 2 computers with me today, not because I'm going to use them both, because this one really is dying. Like sometimes it just turns off now.
What are you gonna do with it when you're done?
I'm going to mourn over it.
Is that the one that studied GMs or something?
Yeah. So it belongs to my ministry account. This one belongs to my savings account.
So, you wouldn't just be able to give it away if you wanted to.
No, why do you want it?
You can always find a use for it.
Wait a minute.
That keyboard's probably worth a lot of money though, but I'd sell that separately. You can buy those for like $130, just the keyboard.
This?
So you could sell it and put the money back into you.
There.
Yeah, because that belongs to, a master account. So we're missing, we never missed anybody before. Is he, do you know if he's sick or
No, he's here,
he just
and
doesn't like me?
he was in the first class,
He's in chapel.
and he was in chapel.
Maybe he doesn't like me. It's okay.
It's not true.
It's okay. He doesn't know that today I have brought
As soon as you lose.
for, have you ever had these before?
Yeah.
Yes.
They're hazelnut, so if you are allergic to some sort of nut, I would not advocate eating them. But if you are not allergic to some sort of nut, then I would strongly advocate eating them because they are, what's the word? Oh, I remember, tasty.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So, awesome. How did you already get a book from the Rushmore?
They had a few copies.
Then we got 100, he said coming. So I don't know if this is part of the 100 that he had coming, but I know he had an initial, but he said in class last week, I think he said he had 100 on the way.
Yeah.
Or something like
I
that.
thought he was getting 1,000, but
Oh, it might have been that. I think that sounds right. I'm sorry. I try to
It's
focus.
a large amount of books.
They can't get socks.
okay. So the moral of the story is he gave you guys a book when he was here.
He had them today because he spoke in chapel.
Oh, that's a sad story. He spoke in chapel again?
Yeah, it wasn't for missions, it was just a message.
Okay.
It wasn't like a missionary chapel, it was just like a preacher.
It was good. It was obey and you will be victorious.
Okay. I'll have to watch later. I was busy being disobedient, not going to church. No, I had a couple things to deal with, and then sometimes if you're gonna be late, it's just easier to say, I'll work on something else.
And that's okay.
Absolutely, it has to be, because, well, just because it does. It appears I don't have my clicker, but that's okay. So today and tomorrow and the next day, so today we're supposed to have a quiz, but actually we're not supposed to have a quiz today. We're supposed to have a quiz last week. And I decided I felt a little bit bad about giving a quiz after we hadn't been together. And so we're gonna do it on Thursday. So just a couple of thoughts. First, I hope sorry that Tuesday fell through. Jamie was gonna come, and actually, and we're just gonna say that it was just the Lord, but the chapters 7, 8, and 9 really fit with what the Rauschenbergs were sharing, especially in chapter 9 where it talks about, which is what you're supposed to have read, talks about getting going. And so I understand he spent a lot of time on fundraising, which is sometimes called furlough or deputation or support raising or friend raising or champion migration or discipleship, financial discipleship, or there are 1,000 terms
I had no
for
idea.
it. Oh yeah?
I didn't know there's so many terms.
Yeah. So there are lots of terms for it. I just finished a training about financial discipleship. And so that really fits with our chapter 9. The avenues to cross-cultural ministries, that was really what Jamie was going to share about. She has done a number of different types of projects and different things to enable the people that she worked with to provide support for themselves, and then also to connect people in her base, so in the United States, to people on her field. And so some different things like that really fit well with the most recent chapters that we have read. So we're going to spend a little time today talking about a couple changes, some discussion, and then work our way a little bit through chapters 7 and 8. We have a couple cleanup things first, but So first, I'm gonna shift from the idea that I had about, sorry, I think that I did this, let me just double check. The idea that I had about discussion questions, here, I'm gonna sit. They are not, I don't think that they're necessary in the way that I thought that they were, because your English is your first language and you're all fine with the class discussion. So I think that I'm gonna shift my discussion questions, the idea of that, those points, to more collateral reading comprehension checking questions. And so I know the last 2 weeks we haven't had questions. Starting next week there will be questions, but they're going to just be different. It's just going to be, did you do the reading? Answer 1 or 2 questions kind of thing, and you'll get your full points. For the last 2 weeks, if you tell me you have done the reading, then I will give you the full points. If you haven't done the reading yet, you should read it and then tell me you've done the reading. Portfolio 1, we're not going to talk about those today, although I read the 2 that I received and really appreciated those articles. And actually, I even made a comment on yours. I don't know if you know what Tiffany
I saw your comment, but I haven't got to
Kosky is doing now.
that.
It's amazing like how God is using her and what she's doing now in Albania, which is not where she wanted to go at all. And then when she first went to Albania, she was only going to be there temporarily. But it's pretty cool what God is doing there with her. So if you haven't turned in Portfolio 1, please do. It's past due. The missionary communication analysis is due on Thursday. Okay, so that's due on Thursday. And I'm really looking forward to those. I hope that it has been a rich experience for you. Yeah, good. So my plan on Thursday, there's going to be a quiz. We're going to talk about Portfolio 1, and we're going to talk about the missionary communications analysis. Like that, our whole class is going to be that discussion. So you want to be sure that you have them done, or else everyone will know that you don't have them done. Okay. The quiz is key terms and discussion questions. So the key terms from the book, discussion questions from previous discussions. So in those discussions, there were a couple of different topics. So I could pull from there. Okay, I have pulled from there. And then some ideas that we discussed in class, like what is a missionary, what is a missionary not. There was that discussion. And then also we talked about culture shock. We also talked about, in our first week, we talked about some cultural differences and adaptability. And then the week before I was gone, we also had those kind of the characteristics, traits of a missionary. So there might be, okay, there could be a question about that as well. Okay, so my thought is that this quiz is only going to take about 20 minutes, 30 minutes max. It's not a big quiz. It's not a huge deal. Okay, and remember the quiz is not any more points than our discussion questions and those things. The portfolios, that's where there are points, and this, so the portfolios, they're 10 per article, and the missionary communication analysis is 80 points. Okay, and so that is an important thing. Okay, looking forward, our mission agency project, right, is coming up as well. So the November 5th is the mission sending organization report, and also your oral presentation. Remember, you cannot choose World Gospel Mission. And so you want to be looking at what agency or what group you do want to look at. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So any questions, problems, monsters?
So we should be catching up on the reading from.
Yeah, even though I didn't post discussion questions, the expectation was that you would do the reading. So My plan is on the quiz, I'm just gonna ask, have you read all the chapters up to now? And if you have, then I'm gonna give you the full points for those discussions. So hypothetically, the quiz is worth 20, but you could actually get 60 points if you have done all the reading and the quiz. Okay, and so that's on Thursday. Okay, so any questions about this? Just kind of catching up, cleaning up nonsense.
So is the missionary communication analysis, is that like all of them or just one?
All three. So you're supposed to do all three. And then after that, after the analysis, you have basically 2 weeks where you're going to do your historic missionary to modern communication. And I don't think that everyone chose historic missionary. I don't have a historic missionary for you yet. So, and I only Sam has chosen an organization. So, and again, if you have an organization, then let me know, because there's only one report per organization, because we're going to do kind of like a mini missions conference kind of thing with our oral presentations where you're going to present about your organization. And I know it's not fair that I claim WGM, but I'm mean, and I'm older than you. And I'm actually employed by them. It's just your family. It means nothing to me.
Good to know.
Okay, so that's coming up. And so, but these chapters point to that. So if there are no other questions, thoughts. Okay. So let's take a minute and just quick prayer. Any request? It will be obedient. That's a good one. I'll find where I put my mind. That'd be a good one. So Share-a-thon at the radio station and Revival at Mount Carmel. Those are big. Also have an unspoken here. It's here at KBC. There's some things that have to be dealt with that I just don't know how. So
My friend, Ryan, she just recently lost her father, and it was a bad situation, so she lives in New Orleans, and so she had to come back here to Harlan to take care of things. And as we prayed in intro to missions as well, for a lady that was at our church on Sunday when when Rejoice was there singing, Louise, she just got out of rehab. And she actually looks as good as I've seen her look all my life, actually. She's been addicted to drugs for years and years and years and years and years. She didn't raise the last two of her children. They're being raised by a couple in her church, but they all came together. That couple brought her to church with her daughter. Her daughter was excited that she was in church. So just pray that she would have victory over that, and that she would come to salvation. That would be an amazing, such an amazing thing.
yeah, God can do it, but she has, it's big. But God can do it, absolutely. Okay. Anyone volunteer to be the prayer?
Hello. Jesus, thank you so much for this day, and thank you for the words that you gave Pastor Brian this morning. Just a good reminder that our obedience shows our love for you. So I just ask that as we continue, that you would be with us and help us to have that spirit of obedience in everything that we do, Lord. I ask that you be in this class today, be with Shushan as she teaches us, and help us to retain the information that she's sharing, and just help us to get something really good out of this class today. Lord, you see all of these prayer requests, you know about the revival at Mount Carmel, and just the need that is there for just a spiritual revival, especially in the students, Lord. I ask that you would come to that place and that you'd meet with them, and that you'd be with their speaker for this week and just help him to stay healthy and strong and able to preach the word, Lord. You see the burden on Shushan's heart and things that she's dealing with, Lord, and I just ask that you would be in the midst of those situations, that whatever it may be, God, that the decisions would be made with your guidance and with your presence there, Lord, and with kingdom things in mind. I ask that you'd be with this woman that Ben mentioned from his church, Lord, that you see that whole situation and you see her needs and the ways that she's chosen some things in her life that have not been for the best, Lord. But I just ask that because you are a God who restores and a God who forgives and a God who redeems, that you would go into that situation and you would be with this woman and be with her children. And Lord, I want to thank you for this couple that is helping to take care of her children and stepping up into that role, Lord. I ask that you give them the strength and the guidance that they need, not only to raise these children, but to be an example to their mother. I praise you, God, just because you are so good. And I have faith that you will be in each of these situations and that you'll be with us throughout the rest of this week. We thank you and we love you. In your name, amen.
Okay, so to finish a couple of older discussions on page 99. And the reason that I'm going back to this is because it fits with, you need to use, oh, there's one over there. Oh, and the reason I'm going back to this is because it fits with what we're going to talk about today, like in chapters 7 and 8. So this, how are missionaries selected? And I wanted to direct us to WGM's victory. Oh, nope. It was almost a victory, to WGM's website. And so when I select go with WGM, I come to this, the ways to serve with World Gospel Mission. So they're short-term, they're mid-term, and they're long-term. So they used to have different names, and you'll find sometimes they have different names, different organizations use different titles and different terminology. WGM has shifted to this and defined it by term. And in chapter 8 in our book, it talks about like kind of this shift, and this is not a brand new book, but it talks about this shift, the idea that it used to be missionaries went for you packed your belongings in a coffin. And part of it because you didn't have a long life expectancy. But also part of it was the idea that you were going and not coming back. If it took you 6 weeks to get to the mission field, coming back, not super feasible. Like if you think it's gonna take you, like a round trip is gonna be 3 months. There's a different kind of commitment to that. And people who did come back home usually were coming home because they were moving home. There was a medical situation, there was something that disqualified them. They could no longer fulfill that commitment. And so terms have shifted, and the idea of terms have shifted. And I think in the book it said typically 4 years. We don't actually see that anymore. Now, long-term is considered 2 or more years. I didn't read the article. I was told about an article that said the average career missionary now serves 7 years. People are coming, just like Dr. Spee said here, people are coming later in life. They're getting the call later in life. They're not coming straight out of high school and then going into mission service where they serve for 40 years and then retire. So WGM is defining the service by terms, and it doesn't necessarily, like in the book it talked like 4 years and then 1 year at home. It doesn't have to look like that. For me as a teacher, WGM determines how long your we call the time you're in the States home ministry assignment, HMA. WGM determines your home ministry assignment based on how long you're on the field. So if I do 9 months on the field, then my HMA would be 3 months. And if I do 18 months on the field, then my HMA is 6 months. So 18 months to 2 years, 9 months to a year. Okay, and so then 6 months. So if I'm on the field for 4 years, then my time at home would be 1 year. Okay, so it's basically a fourth. And why does this come up? Why would this impact me specifically? What else has this type of schedule? 9 to 10 months on, 2 to 3 months off. So as a teacher, especially as a single, I can choose, I could choose to do all my fundraising during breaks. I could do all of my church visits and meeting up with people who support the ministry. I could do it all during the summer, rather than take a whole year away. And a lot of people who are in teaching ministries can choose to do this. People also who have small kids, who they have chosen to put in public school or a local school. There's such a diverse difference in education between the United States and other countries. Moving your kids for school can be a real challenge. And so there are people who only come home to the US for like 3 months at a time. And then go back to their field of service. So it doesn't look the same for everyone. And these terms, like the way that it is, they're set up, it varies. And so let's say we want to look at long-term missions. So there is, I should have done it on this screen, but there is some information about it. And then it says your next step, okay? So this is, in this, the checkpoints, this, it's not you do this and you become a missionary, right? So your next step, let's talk. They don't even give you an application form, okay? You go through a preliminary screening before you even get an application. You cannot find an application to be a missionary on our website. You have to do the preliminary screening. And then, so this, and then you even say, down here, how would you rate your interest level? I just want some more information, or I'm ready to go. Because even if you say I'm ready to go, from filling this out to being on the field, like as a full-time missionary, 18 months minimum. Now, you might be interested in career service, and they might plug you into something if you've never been before. They might plug you into something short-term, whether that be for 2 weeks to see the field, to see the place. I'm actually looking at, we sometimes call those vision trips. If the world is, I may go on a vision trip in December, January to a country I've not been to before. Because it gives you a more realistic picture. But this is kind of like this, when it talks about the checkpoints, right? There's so many steps along the way, and I'm hoping the Ekmans are gonna come and share in chapel in November, and I'm really hoping that they're gonna be able to come in and just share with you guys their journey from graduation to, from his graduation to where they are now in their fundraising process, just all the steps that they've gone through, all the trainings that they have done. Because it's not just a, hey, I want to be a missionary and cool, here you go, have a nice trip. There are so many steps along the way. So another thing from past chapters I wanted to look at just briefly, on page 115, these important topics. We talked about how, having a degree is not the end all, be all, right? That we need to continue to learn. And this, if you look at this important topics, which is continued on the next page, these are some things that really lead into what we're talking about today. So I just wanted to draw your attention back to these resources. So on page 115, there are some resources. And actually, if you, that one of the TESOL resources is what we're using as our text, one of our textbooks in our TESOL class. And you notice that the author, Donald Snow, he's actually two of those resources. He's actually pretty in the field of TESOL as a ministry. He is very renowned, I guess. But so these are just some resources. There are lots more, but I just wanted to draw your attention back to those resources. Any questions about that? Okay. So one thing, we're just going to work our way through chapters 7 and 8, but I wanted to, because I didn't want to miss this, I want to skip to page 155, and I just want to talk just for a minute about the role of worship. And I think that it's, like for those who go to Mount Carmel, have been going to Mount Carmel for church, this is the series topic that Pastor Brian has started for this week. And I just kind of want to open with that. For you, what do you think is the role of worship in missions or in ministry? I don't know what that was. It sounded like a bear. It sounded like a bear. What are your thoughts? The role of worship in ministry, on the mission field?
I think something that's really important in just being a Christian is worshiping God and recognizing who He is and what He's done and His character and things like that. And so from like a ministry standpoint, everything you do is based around Him, and everything you're doing should be for Him. And so I think just that constant reminder of why am I serving this God? Why am I doing this? And also just humbling yourself and being reminded that He is who He says He is, and He deserves that praise. So I think I need to think through this more, because I never really thought about it. I just know it's what we do.
Yeah, and it may seem silly because it really is kind of, if you look over this chapter, and I have all these other slides about the chapter, but I was like, I don't want to miss this. And I don't know that this would have stood out to other people, but I'm like, oh, we got to talk about the role of worship, right? So I absolutely agree with all that you've just said. Other thoughts? Like, you've been to the mission field, you've been in worship services in different culture. Thoughts?
I know in like Hispanic and Spanish speaking culture, worship is a huge part of their time at church. Like they don't just sing like a few songs and then go into the sermon. Like they spend a lot of time worshiping, and they really, there's some cultures where they have girls that have like tambourines and they dance with ribbons and things like that. And that's appropriate for their culture. I don't really know. That's okay here because it's different, but just all the instruments and the different things that they put into worship is just a really big deal. But I think in America, we've come to make it sort of like you go to a concert and you're just listening and you're listening for how good they sing and all that, but you're not going there for the experience of worshiping God for the real reason that there is singing, there is instruments being played.
So when you're in those services, how does it feel worshipful to you? How do you like take that in? Not that like they're worshiping you, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, do you perceive it as worship to God? That's my question, unclear, sorry.
Yeah.
When I played it back, it sounded wrong. Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, I don't know.
How about you, like, so in Bolivia or Cuba, in Uganda, like when you're in a worship service that's different?
Well, for me, I don't really connect to God through music very well. Like, I'm just not a musically inclined person, so I can praise during a musical worship service, and I can connect to the Lord through that. But usually for me, it's in other ways. And so, like when I was in Bolivia, or even when I was in McAllen, like I was worshiping with those people because they brought like God's presence came because of what they were giving, if that makes sense. And so, even though I don't really get a lot of music usually like on my own, if I'm in a corporate situation where there's other people that are, then I can see that they're worshiping, and that kind of brings me into a place of worship.
Yeah. In Uganda, I mean, they're hyper spiritual anyways. That's just their culture, no matter if it's going to the witch doctor, no matter if it's whatever it is, everything is already very spiritualized. So that's an easy transition for them as Christians or born again in the sense. But the first, I mean, they do work. Just as Jonathan said, it's like they just don't sing like, it's not like 2 songs, 3 songs, and then we sit down. I mean, they can go on, for hours, for this entirety of what we would consider the service. But when I was, I have been able to worship with them, and I do feel as though they are truly worshiping God. But there is another man that we fellowship there. He's a missionary in agriculture though, but he brought up a point one of the last times we've seen him. He said, they can go for hours and hours upon time. They pray. I mean, their prayer service is longer than most Christians in America's prayer life is in their home. I mean, they just do. Sometimes it just becomes repetitive and people are just yelling through a microphone, and then that's when you're just like, okay, I think we need to stop. But anyway, he was talking about that. He said they're very loud. Everything is so external, and yes, it's easy for them. He said, but one of the things you find is it's so difficult to get them to figure out how to personally worship. And he's like, there's so much more worship. Sort of as what Sam was saying, in a different way, in a quiet way. And he was like, because he was saying, I just have to come down here in this little tree hammock that they had made. And he was like, and I can worship God and be the same. He said, but they have a hard time in realizing that's a wonderful opportunity for them. He said sometimes they get caught up in maybe some of the noise of it and the external view of it. But when Sam was talking about this very different, like there's different ways, and there's different ways to worship, and there's different ways. Like I guess you would have to, even as a missionary, as a church plant, you have to realize like you have to find somebody who would be sensitive enough to know that culturally they can worship and they can lead people to worship as what they normally do, but also do they understand the diversity of what worship can look like for other people, or what it does look like and should look like in quiet times. Just worshiping God by just your actions or whatever. But
I feel like that's like something that would be really, really important on the mission field, is that if it is like a weird to you kind of worship, then you need to make sure that you have your own time of worship. Like if you're struggling to do that with other people, as long as you're not like trying to shut them down or something, just being a part of that. If you're not worshiping God in that setting, then you need to make sure you're taking your time to worship in a way that is worshipful for you.
I think sometimes it can become very easy to almost become a spectator to worship. And you see this a lot sometimes with teams or short-term people where this is like the worship is so exciting and it's time to take a picture. And like you feel this excitement, you feel this energy, but is it worshipful? Is it pointing you to God, or is your focus on the performance? And this can be true in the States as well. Like this can be true in what's happening, if it's like a concert, if it's someone else is doing it. And it goes to that, is it an external or is it an internal? And so the challenge, I think, and in this sidebar, this is talking about different roles people can have on the mission field, talking about different jobs or skills that lend themselves to mission. And in this sidebar on page 155, it's like 10 reasons why every church planting team needs a worship arts leader. And I'm not arguing that these are not valid points. But I would not say that it means that you have to have a person, but I would say that it means you have to have a resource, even if you are alone, even if you are like the church, you're joining a church and there is worship there, you need to find how you worship. And that may be like a family worship time. That may be you're meeting with some other expats to have, a little prayer and praise time. Like it may look like, so for me, it was my best friend's mom plays the piano at a church. And she sings really loudly, but she sings beautifully. And so sometimes I would not watch the services from that church. I would just watch the music at the beginning, because when like that just feels like it felt comfortable, it feels like home, and it just feels like worship with Terry playing the piano and leading and then anytime my best friend and her sister would do specials with their mom, like I would play those over and over because that just felt like worship. And so recognizing, I think it's really important to recognize the purpose of worship and the place that it has in our lives. I mean, we need accountability. We need to be in God's word. We need to be having quiet times. We also need to worship. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's a random note from page 55.
Support.
I felt like it was. Thank you. All right, so chapter 7. Now, again, I would argue that there are many ways to go. But the book highlights 3 ways to go. And the 3 ways are independent, local church, parachurch, organization. Okay, so we're going to start with independent. Okay, so why don't we talk about some of the, boy, I don't know what's happening. What are some of the pros and cons of going independently? Let's start with some pros. And there were some in the book. Some you can just share from your own thoughts. What are the positives of going? So maybe we need to define, what does it mean to go independently?
You're not with an organization.
You are the organization.
Yeah, that's really what it means. Yeah, that you are, like, you got this. And there are missionaries who have gone independently. There are people that have gone independently. Okay, so So tell me, please, what are some of the pros? What are the reasons that that's a good idea? And this is, there's a table on page 124, if that helps you.
The first thing that comes to mind without looking and just, would be, there's a bit more flexibility. Yeah, there's a bit more flexibility or freedom. And I think there may be a possibly, when you see a need, and you see something, an area which needs to grow or go, sometimes it's a little bit more streamlined. It doesn't, so instead of trickling up the idea of the organization, or does it meet the scope of what was sent, and how does it meet the scope, you can, at times, whether or not it's wise, you can kind of cut that because you know it inside, or, you know, if it's a family, you and your wife know it inside, and you can kind of just streamline and go ahead and move in that direction without having to have either approval or being able to justify it and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. If you go, so, and not being silly, but you do have a lot more independence if you go independently. And so you do have that freedom. Absolutely. And it's quick. You can just decide, I'm going to do this, and then you just do it. Other thoughts? What are some other of the pros? Why should you go independently?
This might be kind of a stretch, but I'll say it anyway. Maybe if you're going into a closed country or a culture that hasn't had great experiences with like missions in the past, then maybe just the fact that the only name that they know is yours, and they don't know like a missions organization or denomination or anything like that. It's just clean slate.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And I would argue that being independent, people who, let's say, get a job for Christians who work for an oil company, who get based in Saudi Arabia, right? They're not what would be considered a missionary just because they're a Christian living in Saudi Arabia. But could they be?
Yeah.
If they have intentionally sought this placement in Saudi Arabia because they are a Christian, and they're whatever job makes you work in the oil industry, some kind of engineer or whatever. So they have this training in engineering, but they want to go and do missions. Would you consider them to be independent?
Well, there are missionaries that are part of WGM that work for independent, like for companies in countries, and the country doesn't know that they're with WGM.
Yeah.
But so I don't know if that, it just depends, it doesn't automatically make them independent because they have another job there, or like when you were,
But if they choose not to serve with an agency, but if their goal is ministry, could they be considered independent?
Sure.
Yeah, I would argue that just like with WGM, we'd say they're bivocational. I would argue that someone who has a job in another place with the intent that they could be deemed an independent missionary. So we don't often think of that. Typically, we think of an independent missionary, the ministry is their full job, and they have still raised funds to do it. But I would argue that those people fall in that category as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So Sam, I do think that your pro does work with that. Like, so then that is the only, like, your company name is what you're associated with, not an organization, not a church, not a denomination. And so when you're building relationships with people, it's from your position of expertise, like you're an engineer. And so it takes away some of the, maybe some of the baggage, the preconceived notions, those ideas. Okay, so I think that's a very valid pro. Other ideas for pros? An argument that I have heard is for funding. If you do raise funds as an independent, who gets all that funding?
You.
Yeah. So it doesn't go to any other expenses. It just goes to you. Okay. Other ideas? Where's your focus? Many missionaries who are with an organization, right? So you have tasks at your home, even if you're not there. You have to do reports, you have to do trainings, you have to do, right? So maybe you're over here, you live in this land, but you don't get to spend 100% of your focus here. Now, the argument would be that independents also have to do things in the States, but they don't necessarily have to turn in reports. They're not accountable in the same way for funding or for a lot of the things that with an organization or a church that they would make expectations of you, of your time. If you are independent, you probably don't have meetings. You don't have to, if you're by yourself, you don't have to sit down with a team of other people from your organization. But, so any other thoughts on pros? And you can see the ones in the book.
This is kind of a pro,
Mhm.
but it's also, I guess, kind of a con if you think too much into it. You wouldn't necessarily have to do any specific training to go. Like when I was in Bolivia, there was these two girls that worked in an orphanage, and they're the same age as me, and they had just left high school and just gone.
Yeah.
And I was like, for like 2 minutes, I was really frustrated with God that these two girls got to go, and I was at college.
Yeah.
And then God just reminded me, like, that's not what I called you to. So for those girls, it's like a pro that they could just go. But for me, like, I didn't call me to that, so I'm happy to be trained for ministry where I am, but that could be a pro.
Mhm. So I agree. It can be a pro, but it can also be a con.
That's what I was kind of.
So let's go on the other side. So what are some of the cons?
No specific training.
Yeah. There's not a standard for training. Okay. What else?
Not having a structure to support you.
Yeah.
In the same way as what Sam said, that pro can also become a con.
Definitely.
So if you're just thinking, so you think about a job interview when they ask you, what's your, like you try to spin like a negative into a positive or whatever, like, or your greatest weakness, you try to spin that as a positive. In the same sense, if you have all that responsibility, then it can become very heavy. And it doesn't become, it is very heavy because all the decisions
potentially lie upon you and, you know, and it's not that God can equip you to do that kind of stuff, but there's other people who have done it. And that's the good thing about organizations is they have experience in that, they have support systems, they have structures. Maybe it's not a blueprint, do this, do this, do this, do this, but they have a structure which you can kind of fall on or lean into to help you with some of those challenges, or, you know, to make, you know, maybe it's not a challenge, but to make it better, to make things more efficient. Sorry.
No, absolutely.
If
Other
you
thoughts?
go independent, you might have a hard time making connections where you're going if you don't know anyone or any ministries there. I feel like with an organization, they usually have at least, or I would hope, some semblance of what to do.
Mhm. And guidelines.
Yeah.
So I was talking with Jamie, and she was talking about distributing soap. That they were given a bunch of soap. And there was a Haitian worker with her who said, like, I'll help you distribute it. We'll get everybody to line up. And she said they created a riot over soap. And she said, and then for months after, people would come to their gate asking for soap.
Mm.
And there's a great book, When Helping Hurts. And there are lots and lots of resources that talk about how very well-meaning people can actually fail in their objective to help, because there are so many factors, right? We talked about culture. We can misunderstand and misinterpret. And when you're going by yourself, yes, there may be a need, but you stepping into the situation, you may not have all the information that someone local might have. In Ukraine, we had a humanitarian aid organization, and the person who distributed all the aid was a Ukrainian lady, an older Ukrainian lady in the church. And I mean, I'd give out anything without talking to Vala, because she knew, I think she knew everything. And she was just a wonderful, godly woman. There's also some accountability. When you are an independent, if someone sends you money and you use that for ministry, awesome. But what if you don't use it for ministry?
Who knows?
Because what if they specifically wanted you to use it for ministry?
No one else would know what they wanted it for.
Yeah, so there's a lack of accountability. And there's also, if you go independently, there are so many pieces and parts. You're not gonna transfer money from one country to another.
That's why I'm gonna join an organization.
Well, up to $8,000 a year, or is it a quarter, you can use $100,000. But yeah, in order to transfer a large sum of money, yeah, there's a lot that.
There are lots of rules.
Yeah.
So if it's less than this amount, you can do this. If it's less than this amount, you can do this. If it's less than this amount, you can do this. But how often you do it and how it's received. So in Ukraine, if somebody sent, you could send Western Union in the town that I lived in Ukraine, but there was only one place to pick up the money. One. And so if you went into this little, and it was not secure. There was nothing about that would make you think this is going to be a great option. But you went into this little place that had like bars on the window to secure the guy inside, and then they would hand your money out, and then you walked outside where there were hoodlums waiting. I'm not even lying. Like there were hoodlums waiting for you. And so like I didn't get money sent by Western Union but one time, but one of our other missionaries did, and he would take 2 Ukrainian guys with him. And did you know Bill Brower? He's not with the mission anymore, but he like was a big guy. He is a big guy. I assume he probably hasn't gotten shorter. But he was this big guy, and he was shaved his head bald. He was this big bald guy, really stood out. He was not small by any means, but he would take 2 Ukrainian guys who were smaller than him. He never went to Western Union by himself. So just one of the cons is you have to get the money to you, and then in some cases, people, if as a Westerner you go to the bank, you expect some level of privacy, right? I'm gonna walk up to the window and everybody else is gonna be back there.
Mhm.
And people are not gonna, there's a little cubby and people can't see what I'm getting. That's not always the case. The person behind you in line might be touching your tushy. You know, you're like, they are close. And so there's not the level of privacy that you might think. And then you have this wad of cash and you walk out of the bank. So there are a number of pros and cons for being an independent. One of the, I think, was it here? No. One of the things was, if you are independent and you leave, what happens to your work?
It leaves with you, in a sense.
Unless you can really establish it with the people there, which takes a long time.
So there's a lack of continuity. And if you are trying to recruit someone to come with you, then I would argue that you're creating an organization, right? But if you're inviting someone to come with you, then you're asking them to do all the things that you did, buy your own tickets, right? You may have a plan, like this is where you fly into, but all of those logistics, it's a lot. The logistics are a lot, and if you are an independent, all of the logistics fall on you. Okay, so any last thoughts on the pros and cons of being an independent?
Okay. So I just read this, and anyways, on the cons, it says fails to take the body principle, the Jesus model, and the Pauline King model seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're drawing that upon negative things that have happened? I mean, like my experience with some independents, it's not necessarily, maybe it's just because I know people that have been blessed to have good, I don't know if I'm saying, I read that and I almost get offended because of some of the people that I know, and I'm like, that's not, like, I don't feel like they disregarded the model of that Christ put, or they didn't take, you know.
There are a lot of negative examples
Mhm.
of people who've gone independently. There are also a number of examples of people who have gone independently and then it's grown into more than just me by myself.
Mhm.
And I think that when it is this me by myself, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this,
Mhm.
then you could argue that it's not taking those things into account, that the responsibility is spread, that we have different roles because we have different giftings. But when you go and you maybe start this work independently, and then you recognize, okay, we need more, we need help, we need people. It can grow into, like I was saying before, like it can grow into like an organization.
Mhm.
And I don't know that I would say like creating an organization. This organization was begun with one person, and we believe one person blessed by God and led by the Holy Spirit. But it didn't stay just her.
Mhm.
Right? And there are lots of stories about her, and I would probably classify her. So there are things that I say in class that are going to get me fired, knowing it's recorded. So so it's not like I'm like trying to be deceptive. I'm only here a year, maybe not. I think that she would be considered like a benevolent dictator.
Mhm.
Like the stories about her, like she was very like, I mean, she was a dictator, but a very benevolent one. Like I think she loved people. And I do believe that she was blessed by the Holy Spirit. But if she had stayed just like, kind of like, this is my work,
Mhm.
and it hadn't expanded, I don't think that it would be here today. Right? It probably would have died with her. So that would be my thought on that. Like, I think you have to, if you stay independent, if you're one person who is, and again, I'm not trying to, but like sometimes you see these kind of like a traveling evangelist
Mhm.
who goes and then goes and then goes and then goes and like look at my ministry. And then you might argue, but so you go and people get saved, but what happens when you leave? Right? And that was when it, like with the Billy Graham Crusades, like they went in beforehand.
Yeah.
And they trained. And then after they left, anybody who filled out a card, they were assigned to one of the churches that they had trained before. So I would argue, so you could say, like Billy Graham was independent, but he wasn't. There was a whole organization underneath that. And so I would argue the same thing, that if you remain, if you're one and only one, then I can't think of, and I can't think of any that were one and only one that remained and remained faithful. But I would be open to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and I don't think that, I think it's supposed to be like a challenge. Like, what is the person, because is there a reason to go independently? And if the reason for going independently is tied to something like, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it, we would label that sin.
Yeah.
If the reason to go independently is that I see a need and I want to go start working on it, and then I would argue that that's different.
Yeah.
All right, so local church. So let's define what local church is.
You also have to define the local.
Yeah, what does the book say? What does the book mean when it's talking about the local church? So according to the book, there are kind of three methods to go. So you can go independently, you can go with a local church or a church, let's just say a church, and then you can go with a parachurch organization.
I don't remember, I didn't read it, but I can't remember. But,
But what's a church?
like, would it be considered, not necessarily your denomination or the denomination of the church, but your church family is what's sending you out?
Yes. And so sometimes we see with large, like mega churches, like they don't use their denomination, right? And I would almost argue that denominational missions could in some ways fall under this. Some denominational missions are really gonna fall under the parachurch organization. But smaller denominational organizations might fall under this. But the local church, like, so let's say there's like a large mega church and they're going to send their own missionaries. So it's kind of like a cross between the independent and the parachurch. So the local church it's a smaller sending body. So let's say your church has 3,000 people, you don't need a mission agency. You say our church can fund its own missionaries. So in our 3,000 church body, we can send 6 missionary families, and we're going to send all 6 of our missionary families to this work in Honduras. And so basically, what it might look like is, here's the church, the U.S. church. And we're gonna take this little piece of our church, and we're gonna send it down here to Honduras. So here's the H. The H is there. It's no longer there. Okay? So what are some pros of this?
Can be more personal
Uh-huh.
for the supporters and.
Yep. You don't have to, you're not traveling around and building a team to pray for you and support you. They all come from your church. So when you come home, you're reporting to one place. So it adds that accountability. It still streamlines things, right? Because what this church is doing, we're probably just gonna duplicate it down here, right? So if this church is focused on outreach with kids, it's probably what you're gonna do down here. If this church has an after-school program, probably what you're gonna do down here. And if it's a school break, and so up here, you're not doing the after-school program, maybe you're gonna get a group who do the after-school program. They're gonna come down and help with yours. Okay? So what are some pros and cons of this kind of structure?
One thing I was gonna mention about the other one, I don't know if we mentioned it, but a prayer base. Because when you're independent, like the people you know, you can ask to pray for you,
Yeah.
but when you're in a big church like that, there's a lot more people that can be praying for you.
Yep, absolutely. And that wasn't my notes, but I didn't mention, so absolutely. When you're an independent, it's not just about how are you going to fund, but it's like, how are you gonna fuel your ministry? And without prayer, how are you gonna fuel it?
Might be easier to give updates, because you can just tell the pastor in the USA church, this is what's going on, he just says to everybody.
And today, with today's world, you might actually even be in the same Sunday service. Here, you're on the same time, you may be on the same time zone or only off by an hour or two. You can actually live stream. So this pastor is actually the pastor of that church. I'm not saying that's always the case, but that could happen today, right?
Like my pastor live streams from Honduras to our church a lot.
So reverse. So the CH, URC is down here and the H is up here, right? Okay. What are some cons for this?
If the church back home falls apart or something bad goes on there, then it's gonna really harm the ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. How indigenous is this church?
Not very.
We probably just copied and pasted.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one of the drawbacks of, and again, on page 130, there's a table of pros and cons. But this does a lot of good things. Like this ministry belongs to that church. And there are reasons that's wonderful. There are also reasons that's not so wonderful. Right? Because this ministry should belong to God. And if it belongs to the church, there are both positives and negatives. They're going to fund it. But again, if the church runs out of funding, if they haven't established a way for that church to fund itself, right? And it does not take into account that a church in Honduras probably should look different than a church in America because the culture is different, right? And it looks at, again, that church can be really, really involved, But then if that church in the United States is really, really involved, perhaps it doesn't leave room for leadership for the people in the church in Honduras. Okay? Also, training. Perhaps the church in America is not really equipped to train their missionaries. Perhaps they're not really equipped to screen people to go as missionaries. They may not have those resources. Okay? And they may just be transporting culture. Also, who's the boss?
Pastor of the church or the board of the
In America,
home church.
right? So there is, this can cause some different challenges. And what if the church in America, what happens when the church in Honduras wants to do something different?
They have to get permission from the Church in America.
What if America says no?
And the thing about that is he's not, or she's not in that leadership team may not be there, may have never been there.
Yep.
They may have limitations where they can't go. So then it becomes a struggle and to try, even if you as the representative there, the representative missionary, begins, there just comes a gap that he may not be able to cross because they're not able to get there and they're not able to see, like
Yeah.
they just can't comprehend it. I mean, I don't know, there's more of it in my mind, but I can't really.
But almost like the people in the United States, it's very easy to put on other people your experience.
Mhm.
And so if the church in America hasn't been, and you say, oh, we have kids ministry, they have kids ministry, the pictures, they both met on this day at this time. So in your mind, they may be very similar, and in reality, they would be very different.
Yeah.
That kind of idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and what kind of training, like pastoral training, or what kind of training is happening in Honduras? So not only training for the missionaries going, but training on the field. Okay, so last one. So a parachurch organization, mission organization, what is an NGO? Non-governmental aid organization. Okay, so a lot of times you'll hear about like the Red Cross and like these different organizations. So maybe the government is doing something, and then there are a number of NGOs. So mission organizations can sometimes fall under the category of an NGO, a non-government organization. So parachurch, okay? So if we think about and we're using USA as base, we know that it's not only USA, right? So if we think about independent, like we have one little guy that leaves the US. If we think about the church, we take a part of the church and we go. We think parachurch, okay? So a parachurch is this, and it's like you're taking from all these little churches, right? And then you're sending. Okay, so this is the idea of a mission organization or a parachurch organization. So parachurch just means outside the church. So they're coming alongside the church. Now, organizations, a lot of times denominational ministries fall under this. Larger denominations create denominational mission organizations. And you also have intra-denominational organizations like World Gospel Mission. So World Gospel Mission started out of prayer in Iowa, out of the Holiness Movement. And there were lots of small churches, small denominations that did not have their own agency. So WGM So here we are in the Kentucky Mountain Holiness Association. Does the Kentucky Mountain Holiness Association have its own missions organization?
No.
Do they send missionaries? Can 5 Mile send its own missionaries? No. So if you are with the KMHA and you want to go on a mission field, really your choices are, I'm gonna go independently, I'll just do it, or to go with an organization. And WGM is an organization that fits with the KMHA. So, so we'll pick up here, I don't know when, because on Thursday, we're going to do our quiz. We're gonna talk a little bit about the portfolios. So there needs to be 3 articles. It should be already online, and I have 2 of the 4 in our class. And then your missionary communication analysis. And we're gonna talk a little bit about those on Thursday. I have a few more slides. But almost done, only 3 more slides. So we'll probably visit this the following Tuesday. Remember that next week you have more portfolios due. So even if you have yours done, it wouldn't be bad to be looking for some more articles, because next week you need to do 3 more. If you haven't done yours yet, I would encourage you to go ahead and look for 6. Make sure you turn 3 in by Thursday, and then that's all. And then that's all. That's that helpful. All right. No questions, problems, monsters. You're free to go. Thank you guys very much. I hope this was helpful. And I think this is more where I want our discussions to go. I don't think you need the discussion questions. I think that we can just have discussions like this from the reading.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yes, good.
Me too. I prefer this than to have, I think that when I ask the questions, you feel like you have to give me the answers that you gave me. And that wasn't necessarily my intent. My intent was just to help prepare you to answer, but you're prepared to answer anyway. So that's why I'm gonna do that shift. It wasn't necessary in the way that I thought it would be, because I've been teaching people in other countries.
I wish we had longer. I wish this class was longer.
I agree, Ben. Sometimes I worry that I'm wasting our time, but I feel like
No,
I'm not.
I don't think you're
I'm
wasting
like, what
time.
happened to the time?
I look forward to this class.
Wisely enough. So then you're not on my list of people who wanted information about missions cabinet roles. So I'm not trying to pressure you into that, but I did type up roles for the different, or task-based roles, which are a little bit different than what they have been in the past. So if you wanted a copy of that, I can put it in your mailbox.
Yeah.
But no pressure to do that.
Yeah.
There are about 8 or 9, there are 4 roles, 8 or 9 people who said they would be interested in getting more information. And then there is like the nomination and then the election or whatever. So it's not saying for who would get a role, but it's saying kind of these are the expectations, and yeah, I would be open to doing that. I know you're pretty small, but if you're interested,
Yeah.
put one in your mail.
I was gonna add, I actually have been meaning to ask you more about that, so
Yes.
it's good that you brought that up. Yeah,
I'll
so
put
if
it
you
in
don't
my mailbox.
care, will you do that?
Yep, tell me, I don't know where the guy's mailbox is. Is there
You just put it in Bringle, you can just put it in Bringle door, the
I
door.
think it's carried over.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I check periodically, but Henry, I think, is the guy who primarily makes
Brings
sure
it
that
over.
that gets over.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stick it in the box today.
Great. And then, in your busy schedule, at some point, could we have a 10-minute conversation
Yes.
as it relates to missions and
Yeah,
like my future and,
absolutely. I can give you more than 10 minutes for that conversation.
well,
Are you wanting to have it now? I can go.
no. I need to actually go to make
Yeah.
sure that
So
one of our students got where they're supposed to.
Wednesday is, like, I have classes Tuesday and Wednesday's much better. What does your Wednesday look like?
Well, I work every Wednesday
Okay.
typically.
So,
every Wednesday, yeah, it's just 12-hour shifts.
Okay, Thursday. So today, my friend Carly's coming over, I'm gonna watch her kids this afternoon. So after class, I have that, and then I'm meeting somebody during study hours. So Thursday would be better for me as well. I could do Thursday after, we could do lunch on Thursday if you want, or I can do after 2:15. I'm done at 2:10. So if that works for you.
I think Thursday at lunch would be fine,
Okay,
or like lunch, yeah.
Yep.
Be fine.
awesome.
Thank you so much.
No problem. I'm excited. Oh, and I've been recording the whole time. That's nice.